Deep, dark, and unstoppable, our stories flow like obsidian through the cracks of the human experience, revealing the raw truth. Join us for an intense journey into the heart of drama and cinematic excellence. Hit subscribe now and stay on the cutting edge with us.
My daughter Lily's name was on the reservation, not my sister-in-law's, not her college roommates, not the 4 other women who somehow materialized at the host stand of Aurelius, the most overbooked restaurant in the city, wearing cocktail dresses and the particular kind of smile that means someone else is paying. Lily had waited 11 months for that table. She turned 25 in January. She had just passed her CPA exam on the first attempt after studying 6 days a week for 4 months while working full-time. I am her mother. I booked that dinner the previous February, the moment the restaurant opened its reservation calendar, a corner booth in the private dining room, tasting menu, wine pairing, 7 courses, the whole thing. I manage contracts for a mid-sized commercial real estate firm. I read fine print for a living. I know exactly what I am agreeing to, and I know exactly what I am not agreeing to. And I had not agreed to feed my sister-in-law and her entire social circle on the night my daughter finally got to feel like she had made it. But there my sister-in-law stood, already seated, already holding the wine list, already telling the sommelier she would need a moment because she was deciding between the Burgundy flights. I stood in the doorway and felt something go very still inside me. I handle commercial lease disputes. I have sat across the table from men twice my age, who thought they could bully me out of a clause I had spent 3 weeks negotiating. I do not rattle easily, but the specific kind of rage that rises when someone crashes your daughter's hard-earned celebration and immediately starts ordering wine she has no intention of paying for, that is its own category. That is personal. My sister-in-law, Connie, is 41 years old and has never once paid for a meal she did not have to. I do not say that cruelly. I say it the way you describe a physical fact, like the color of someone's car. Connie has a gift for arriving at the exact moment when someone else is holding a credit card and making herself impossible to disinvite without a scene. She has been doing it since before I married into this family 12 years ago. She cried at my bridal shower because she said my centerpieces were nicer than hers had been. She showed up at Lily's high school graduation with 3 friends, people none of us had ever met, and ate the entire catering spread before half the family arrived. Every Christmas, she sends a group text asking who is hosting and then shows up with nothing and leaves with leftovers in containers she brings from home. My mother-in-law thinks this is charming. She calls it Connie, being Connie. Last spring, Connie borrowed $400 from my husband for what she described as a gap in her car insurance. 6 weeks later, she posted a reel from a rooftop bar in Nashville with a caption that said, "Girls just need a reset sometimes." My husband, who is a genuinely patient man, quietly stopped answering her calls after that. I said nothing. I noted it. I filed it. I am very good at filing things. The night of Lily's dinner, I had driven separately because I was coming from a site visit across town. My husband and Lily were already in the parking lot when I pulled in. Lily was wearing a dress she had ordered 2 months in advance. She looked the way you look when you have worked very hard for something and you know the night is going to match what you imagined. She did not look that way for long. My husband spotted his sister through the front window before we walked in. He said her name the way you say a word when you are hoping you misread it. We went inside anyway. The host confirmed our reservation. Private booth. Corner. Party of 4. I looked at the table. There were 9 place settings. Connie had brought her book club. She stood up when she saw us, arms open, voice at a volume calibrated to include the entire room. "Oh my gosh, there she is, the CPA. We are so proud of you." She pulled Lily into a hug that lasted approximately 1 second before she turned to her friends and said, "Her aunt organized this whole celebration dinner, is that not the sweetest thing?" Lily looked at me. I looked at the table. There were 2 empty champagne flutes at every setting. The bread basket was already half gone. One of the women had her phone propped against the salt cellar, filming. The sommelier appeared. He was young, professional, slightly pained in the way of someone who had already had a complicated evening. He asked if we were ready to discuss the wine pairing for the tasting menu. Connie answered before any of us could. "Actually," she said, "we are going to do the full pairing for everyone." She gestured broadly at all 9 settings. "And can we get another basket of the truffle bread?" We went through the first one so fast. I set my bag down very deliberately on the empty chair beside me. I looked at my husband. He gave me the look he gives me when he knows something is happening but has not yet calculated the shape of it. I excused myself, not to the restroom, not to get air. I went to find the general manager. Her name was Priya, and she recognized me the moment I said my name. Our firm had hosted a client dinner at Aurelius 4 months prior. 40 covers, full buyout of the private room, wine director selection. I had coordinated directly with Priya for 6 weeks. She knew what my account was worth through a restaurant. I did not explain the family situation. I did not make it emotional. I said, the reservation for the private booth is a party of 4. The other 5 guests are walk-ins. Separate check, opened immediately, charged to them directly. Nothing, not a breadbasket, not a sparkling water, goes to my account after the party of 4's tasting menu begins. If there is any confusion at the table about who owes what, I need that resolved before the first course lands. Priya looked at me for exactly 1 second. Then she said, absolutely, I will take care of it personally. I thanked her and walked back to the table. Connie was mid-story about a road trip she was planning. One of her friends was filming a slow pan of the table decor. Lily was sitting with her hands folded in her lap, looking at the centerpiece with the specific expression of someone who has decided not to cry in public. I sat down next to my daughter. I put my hand over hers under the table. I leaned in and said very quietly, tonight is still yours, I promise. She looked at me. I could see her deciding whether to believe me. She believed me. The first course arrived. For the 4 of us, it was a perfectly plated amuse-bouche, a single bite of seared scallop over a smear of cauliflower cream, edged with caviar pearls. For Connie's side of the table, a separate server arrived with menus, not tasting menus, a la carte. Connie stared at the menu. Then she looked up. Are we not all doing the tasting menu? My husband answered that one. We have a reservation for 4, he said. He said it the way he says everything, very calm, very flat, no room for argument in the tone of it. Connie's eyes moved to me. I was eating my scallop. She turned to her friends, adjusted her expression into something that was supposed to look unbothered, and said, oh well, let us just order. And then she opened the menu and ordered the Wagyu beef tenderloin, the lobster bisque starter, the heirloom beet salad, and a glass of the 2019 Barolo that the sommelier had just described as a limited allocation. Her friends followed her lead. One ordered the whole roasted duck. Another asked for extra of the house-made focaccia. The woman who had been filming asked the server to explain the difference between 2 of the premium cocktails and then ordered both to taste. I watched this happen with the serene detachment of someone who already knows the last chapter. The dinner was long and beautiful. Priya had arranged for the kitchen to send Lily a small plate of handmade pasta with black truffle that was not on the tasting menu, a gift from the chef. The sommelier crouched beside our end of the table and walked us through each pairing with the kind of quiet enthusiasm that makes you feel like the luckiest person in the room. Lily asked questions. She took notes on her phone. She laughed. At one point, I looked at her, candlelight on her face, mid-conversation with the sommelier about malolactic fermentation, and I thought, this is exactly what the night was supposed to be. Across the table, Connie's book club was loud and happy and ordering dessert cocktails. That was fine. Every dollar of it was on their own tab. At 9:40, a server placed a leather folder in the center of Connie's end of the table. The conversation did not stop immediately, but it slowed. Connie reached for it with the confidence of someone who has never once worried about a bill in a restaurant she did not plan to pay for. She flicked it open. I was not watching. I did not need to. I was finishing the last of my dessert wine, a small pour of Sauternes that tasted like honey and stone fruit, and listening to Lily describe what she was going to do with her first bonus. But I heard it. Not words. The specific absence of words that happens when someone opens a bill and the number inside is not what they expected. A sharp intake of breath. The sound of a leather folder being set down with more care than it was picked up. I heard Connie say, in a voice pitched just below the rest of the table noise, wait, this is just for us? Yes, the server said pleasantly. Your party's check. The other reservation has a separate account. Connie's chair shifted. I felt her eyes on me before I turned to look. When I did, she was already composing her face into something that was supposed to look like this was a misunderstanding, a simple clerical mix-up, something that could be smoothed over with a word from me. I looked at her for a moment. Then I looked back at my daughter. She knows someone at the table will fix it, Connie said, to no one in particular, to everyone. She always takes care of things. That is just who she is. My husband set his napkin on the table. Who she is, he said, is someone who made a reservation for 4 people. Connie's smile held. Barely. She looked at her friends. She said, "It is fine, I have got it." And she pulled out her card and handed it to the server without looking at the total. The card came back 3 minutes later. The server returned it with a discretion I appreciated and said quietly, "I am sorry, it looks like it was declined." Connie's neck flushed red. She said there was probably a hold on it from travel. She produced a second card. "This one," she said, confident again. The server returned. His expression had not changed. He was very good. "I am sorry," he said. "This one as well." The woman who had ordered both cocktails to taste said, "Connie, what is going on?" "Nothing," Connie said tightly. "Technical issue." She opened her wallet flat on a table and looked at her cards the way you look at something you were hoping would be different than it is. She chose a third, gold. The kind that is supposed to signal something. The server came back. I watched Connie watch his face. She could read the answer before he opened his mouth. The woman who had ordered the duck reached for her own wallet without being asked. She put cash on the table. Enough to cover herself. She stood up, put on her coat, and said she had an early morning. She did not make eye contact with Connie when she left. 2 others followed within 4 minutes. One paid her portion. One did not. The woman who had been filming was still at the table when the server came back to clarify the remaining balance. She looked at the folder. She looked at Connie. She said audibly, "I thought you said this was handled." I stood up. I touched Lily's shoulder. I said, "Ready?" Lily stood. She was smiling. Not the brittle kind, the real kind. We walked out. In the lobby, Priya caught my eye. She gave me a small nod. I gave her one back. Outside, the air was cool. Lily took a breath and looked up at the sky the way you do when you have been inside a loud room for a long time and you finally have quiet. Then she looked at me and said, "How did you know she was going to do that?" I said, "I know her." Lily linked her arm through mine. We walked to the car. What I did not tell her yet, because it was her night, and I did not want to bring the weight of it into the rest of the evening, was what happened 2 days later. Connie called my husband. Not me. She had enough instinct for self-preservation to know not to call me. She told him the restaurant had made an error. She told him she was going to dispute the charge. She said that family does not split checks at celebrations and that I had humiliated her in front of her friends, and that she thought I had always had it out for her, and that she was the one who had actually organized our entire family Christmas 3 years ago, and nobody ever thanked her for it, and that this was the last time she was going to let me treat her like she did not matter. My husband listened to the entire thing. Then he said, "The reservation was for 4. You brought 5 extra people without asking. The restaurant split the check at my wife's request. That is not an error." He paused. "And Connie, the Christmas dinner you organized was at our house. We paid for the food." She hung up. My mother-in-law called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. The message was 4 minutes long and covered, in order, how hard Connie's life had been lately, how I had always been a bit much, how a dinner was just a dinner, how keeping the peace was something adults had to choose to do, and how she hoped I would reflect on what kind of energy I was bringing into this family. I listened to it once. I did not call back. Here is what I want to tell you, because I know exactly what you are thinking right now. You are thinking, why did it take this long? Why did you let her crash the graduation party years ago and say nothing? Why did you stay quiet about the Nashville trip and the borrowed $400 and every dinner and holiday and gathering where she showed up uninvited and left full and untouched by consequence? I know. I have asked myself the same thing. The honest answer is this. When you are in a family that has decided someone is untouchable, really decided it, built it into the architecture of every gathering and every conversation and every rolled eye followed by, that is just how she is. You start to calculate the cost of every confrontation, and the cost always looks too high. You think, is this the hill? Is tonight the night I want to blow everything up for? And then you think, no, not tonight. I will handle it later. I will find a softer way. There is no softer way. Soft ways are how Connie survived 12 years of consequences that should have come much sooner. What changed was Lily. When I watched my daughter sit down at her own celebration dinner and fold her hands in her lap and decide not to cry, that was when the calculation changed. I was done protecting the peace at my daughter's expense. Some things are worth blowing up for. A 25-year-old woman who studied until midnight for 4 months and passed a brutal exam and deserved one perfect dinner. That is a hill. That is my hill. So here's what I know now, on the other side of it. First, the people who invoke family the loudest are usually the ones extracting the most from it. The word family is not a contract. It does not obligate you to fund someone's lifestyle or absorb someone's chaos or swallow your daughter's celebration so someone else can perform generosity they are not actually paying for. Second, logistics are more powerful than arguments. I did not confront Connie at the table. I did not make a speech. I went to the manager and I changed the check. That was it. No drama. No raised voices. No moment for Connie to reframe herself as the victim of my anger. Just a quiet, structural change that made it impossible for her to do what she had planned to do. Parasites do not survive in the light of an itemized receipt. Third, the fallout will feel catastrophic and then it will not. My mother-in-law's voicemail felt enormous for about 48 hours. Then it became background noise. 3 weeks later, my husband and I hosted Lily's real celebration at home. Just the people who had actually shown up for her year after year through the studying and the failed practice exams and the 6 a.m. wake-ups. We opened a good bottle of wine. We ate dinner at our own table. Nobody filmed it. Nobody needed to. Lily framed her CPA certificate and hung it on the wall above her desk. The dinner ended up costing me exactly what I had budgeted for a party of 4. That is the number that matters. I know some of you are sitting with your own version of this right now. A Connie. A family dinner that keeps going sideways. A celebration that belongs to someone you love that keeps getting annexed by someone who treats every gathering as an opportunity. You know exactly who I am talking about, and you have made the same calculation I used to make. The math that says the cost of confrontation is higher than the cost of tolerance. I am telling you the math is wrong. The cost of tolerance is not zero. It accumulates. It shows up in your daughter's face when she sits down at her own dinner and decides not to cry. It shows up in the $400 your husband lent and never got back, and the Christmas he paid for that someone else took credit for, and the graduation party where strangers ate your food while your family stood at the edge of their own celebration. The check does not disappear because you did not look at it. Separate the checks. Let the number land where it belongs. And then take your daughter to the table you reserved for her and watch her ask the sommelier about malolactic fermentation and let the evening be exactly what you planned it to be. That is it. That is the whole strategy. If any of this landed somewhere real for you, if you have been doing the wrong math on someone in your life, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me your version of this. Tell me where you drew the line or where you are still deciding whether to. And if you are done funding other people's performances while your own people sit with their hands folded and decide not to make a scene, hit subscribe. I am still at this table, and my check is closed. I've been thinking about cause and effect a lot since that night, not in any grand cosmic sense. I am not someone who believes the universe is keeping score and will eventually settle accounts. I think people settle their own accounts. I think Connie headed herself that $400 spa trip and the Nashville reel and every declined card at Aurelius all by herself, one decision at a time over years. The only thing that changed that night was that I stopped absorbing the consequences for her. The moment I walked to Priya's office and asked for a separate check, I stopped standing between Connie and the results of her own choices. That is all it was. I did not engineer her humiliation. I just moved out of the way. What I keep coming back to is Lily's face in the doorway. That split second before she decided not to cry. I have replayed it probably 100 times. And what strikes me now is that my daughter has more discipline and more dignity at 25 than most people develop in a lifetime. She studied for 4 months and passed a brutal exam. She showed up at that restaurant in a dress she had been looking forward to wearing, ready to celebrate something she had genuinely earned. And her first instinct, when someone tried to take that from her, was to fold her hands in her lap and protect everyone else from her own disappointment. That is not weakness. That is actually a kind of moral sophistication, knowing that your pain is not other people's emergency, but it is also something you can take too far. You can be so careful about not making a scene that you spend a decade watching someone else make scenes at your expense and call it keeping the peace. I had done exactly that for 12 years. The thing I understand now on the other side of it is that integrity is not just about what you refuse to do. It is also about what you refuse to allow. There is a kind of passive participation in bad behavior, funding it, cushioning it, absorbing it, that feels like the high road but is actually just a longer route to the same damage. Connie's entitlement did not come from nowhere. It was built, year by year, on the foundation of people who decided the cost of stopping her was too high. I was part of that foundation. I do not say that to punish myself. I say it because it is true, and because the truth of it is what finally made me move. The courage I am most proud of from that night is not the conversation with Priya. It is the moment I sat back down next to Lily, put my hand over hers and said, "Tonight is still yours." Because that required me to actually believe it. To believe that her celebration was worth protecting even at the cost of a family rupture I'd been trying to avoid for over a decade. Lily framed her certificate and hung it on her wall. That image, that small, ordinary, unhurried act of a person honoring her own achievement in her own home is what the night was actually about. Not the restaurant, not the wine, not the 3 declined cards, just that. If you are still doing the calculation, still weighing whether the confrontation is worth it, I want you to think about whoever your Lily is. The person whose celebration you were quietly protecting while someone else helps themselves to the center of the table. The cost you keep absorbing to avoid the scene is going to happen eventually. The only question is whether you choose when.